The killer who returned after his execution. The first knock came at exactly 3 a.m. Sharp. It wasn't a polite knock. It was slow, heavy, like someone was dragging their hand across the wood of the front door. Inside the small home on Oak Ridge Avenue, the Peterson family froze. James Peterson, the father, sat up in bed. His wife, Marlene, clutched his arm, whispering, "Don't answer it." Their teenage daughter, Emma, peeked from her bedroom door down the hall, eyes wide. The knocking came again, this time harder. James gathered the courage to creep toward the front door. Through the peephole, he saw a man, a tall figure dressed in a dark jacket. His face was pale, his hair cut short, and his eyes empty, cold as stone. James's heart stopped. He knew that face. It was Daniel Kline, the serial killer who had terrorized Iowa 10 years earlier, the same man who was caught, tried, and executed in front of the world. But Daniel Kline had been dead for 5 years. James staggered back from the door. His knees felt weak. This isn't possible," he whispered. The knocking grew faster, as if the man outside knew he had been recognized. By now, Marlene had dialed the police. Her voice shook as she said, "Someone's at our door. My husband says..." "He says it looks like Daniel Kline." The operator paused, then replied carefully, "Ma'am, Daniel Kline was executed in 20. But when police arrived 10 minutes later, the man was gone. No footprints on the porch, no sign anyone had been there. Only one strange detail. The family's security camera showed the man perfectly. His pale face, his black eyes, his slow knocking. And it was Daniel Kline. News spread fast. By sunrise, the story of the killer who came back was on every local channel. Old headlines about Daniel Kline resurfaced. Butcher of Cedar Rapids. Monster sentenced to death. Execution brings closure. Reporters reminded viewers of how Kline had murdered 8 people in one night, leaving a town in fear for years. His execution had been meant to end the nightmare. Yet here he was, seen again, standing on doorsteps, staring through windows, even appearing on cameras across town, sometimes at the exact same time. Some thought it was a cruel prank. Others whispered about cults and rituals. But many in Cedar Rapids believed the same chilling truth. Daniel Kline had returned. That night, more calls poured into the police station. One woman claimed she saw him standing at the edge of her driveway. A truck driver swore he spotted him on a lonely stretch of Highway 30. Another family posted footage online showing him walking past their living room window at exactly 3:03 a.m. The town was gripped with fear. Everyone knew Daniel Kline had been a brutal killer, but the fact that he had been executed and was now appearing everywhere made the terror far worse. Because if death couldn't stop him, what could? And then, as the second night fell, a detective working the case got a call on his cell phone. The screen flashed an unknown number. When he answered, the voice on the other end whispered, "I'm home." Detective Mark Hanley stared at his phone in disbelief. The voice on the line had been clear, calm, familiar. The same deep, steady tone he remembered from watching Daniel Kline's trial years earlier. It had said only 2 words, "I'm home." Then the line went dead. Mark sat frozen at his desk inside the Cedar Rapids police station. Around him, the room buzzed with phones ringing, officers writing reports, and the low hum of televisions playing the news. But to him, everything sounded distant. It wasn't possible. Daniel Kline was gone. Mark himself had been at the state prison in Fort Madison the night of the execution. He had watched the live feed as the lethal injection was carried out. He remembered Kline's last stare, those cold eyes, and the way he hadn't said a single word before dying. And yet here was his voice. By the next day, panic spread through town like wildfire. Families began locking their doors hours before sunset. Stores closed early. Parents kept their children home from school. Nobody wanted to be outside after dark. News reporters camped outside the Peterson home, the first family who claimed to have seen Kline. Their grainy security footage was replayed on TV again and again. Some viewers said the man looked exactly like the executed killer. Others insisted it had to be doctored footage, a cruel trick by someone seeking attention. But Mark knew the truth. He had gotten the call himself. At a community meeting that evening, the mayor tried to calm everyone down. "What you're seeing is fear feeding on itself," he said firmly. "There are no ghosts, no killers coming back from the grave." But while he spoke, a woman in the crowd screamed. She pointed at the back doors of the gymnasium. Several people swore they saw a pale face staring in through the glass before it vanished. The room erupted in chaos. That same night, strange calls began hit. Detective Mark Hanley barely slept that night. The words from the call echoed in his mind. "You're next." He kept replaying the security footage, frame by frame, trying to make sense of it. Daniel Kline's face, pale and expressionless, appeared in too many places at once. It was impossible. By morning, Cedar Rapids was a ghost town. Streets that were usually busy with cars and families now stood empty. Businesses locked their doors. Neighbors avoided eye contact. It felt like the entire town was holding its breath. And then, the second disappearance was reported. A young couple, driving home from the late shift, never made it back. Their car was found abandoned on a dirt road just outside of town. The keys were still in the ignition. The headlights were still on. Both doors hung open, but there was no sign of them. Only a set of muddy footprints leading away from the car. Footprints too large, too heavy to belong to either of them. The press descended like vultures. National networks picked up the story. Some reporters called it the return of the Iowa butcher. Others whispered about cults, doppelgangers, or supernatural revenge. Everyone had a theory, but no one had answers. Detective Hanley decided to go back to the place it all started, the state prison where Daniel Kline was executed. He drove for hours, rehearsing the questions in his head. When he arrived, the warden looked tired, nervous. "You saw the execution," Hanley said firmly. "You know he's dead." The warden swallowed hard. "I saw what everyone saw. The injection, the flat line. We did our job." He hesitated before adding, "But sometimes I wonder if that man ever belonged to this world at all." Hanley left the prison more unsettled than before. That night, his phone rang again, the same unknown number. He didn't want to answer, but something in him had to. Slowly he pressed it to his ear. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the faint sound of a crowd chanting, voices overlapping, and then the same cold whisper. "I told you, detective, death is only the beginning." Hanley dropped the phone. His hands shook. Reports poured in faster now. People claimed to see Daniel Kline in their homes, reflected in mirrors, standing in hallways, watching from yards. One man swore he saw him inside his child's closet. Another said Kline appeared on his television, even though it wasn't turned on. It was no longer a question of if he was back. The real question was how many of him were out there. On the fourth night, Hanley returned to the Petersons' home, the place where the first sighting occurred. He stood on the porch, staring at the door where Kline had once knocked. The house was quiet, but he felt it, an unnatural chill in the air. At exactly 3:03 a.m., his phone lit up. Same number. He didn't answer this time. Instead, he let it ring. The sound echoed through the silent street. Then, slowly, the Petersons' front door began to rattle. The knocking started again. And behind him, on every house along Oak Ridge Avenue, other doors began to knock in unison. Detective Hanley turned in horror as the entire neighborhood seemed to breathe with one heartbeat, one presence. The whisper came again, not through the phone this time, but carried on the night air. "You can't stop me. I never left." Detective Hanley could barely breathe. The knocking echoed from every door on Oak Ridge Avenue. Dozens of houses, dozens of fists pounding in rhythm. The sound grew louder, shaking the air, rattling windows, crawling under his skin. Hanley raised his gun, but he knew it was useless. How do you shoot what's already dead? Suddenly, all the knocking stopped at once. Silence fell, too heavy, too final. And then, every porch light on the street flickered on. Dozens of pale figures stood outside the homes. Tall, motionless, their faces identical, the same cold expression, the same empty stare. Daniel Kline multiplied. Hanley's stomach twisted. He counted at least 20 of them, each one staring forward, waiting. His phone buzzed again. Against his better judgment, he answered. This time, there was no whisper. Instead, he heard the sound of his own voice. "Detective Mark Hanley," it said, steady and calm. "You should have stopped me when you had the chance." Hanley froze. The voice was his, perfectly his, and as he looked around, one of the figures stepped forward from the shadows. It wasn't Daniel Kline this time. It was him, a reflection of himself, pale and expressionless, holding the same phone in its hand. Hanley stumbled back. No, no, this isn't real. But it was. The figure lifted its phone, and the entire street of duplicates lifted theirs too. Every screen glowed with the same caller ID, Mark Hanley. The real Hanley dropped his phone. It hit the pavement, the screen cracking, but the glow didn't stop. Mist seeped out, curling across the ground, winding toward him like smoke searching for air. Doors up and down the block began to creak open. Terrified families peeked out, drawn by the lights and sounds. Children clung to parents. People shouted in panic. And then, one by one, the pale figures began to step inside. Screams filled the night. Hanley